Greetings everyone, wanted to stop by and give a quick couple of thoughts on Spider-Man for PS4, and oh my goodness, I've been waiting for this game for a heck of a long time. I am a huge Spider-Man fan. I've always enjoyed the character. It's one of those things that has just kind of been part of my life for so long, and I've tried my best not to think about it until I got my hands on it, because it was one of those things that, you know, looking at all of these videos, it's like, man, this game looks gorgeous, but I want to know how it feels. So let's get into that. Let's start talking about why this game feels incredible. So for anyone who's seen some of this stuff, and hopefully you're seeing all this right now, is that Spider-Man is a game that is focused on movement for the most part. You're kind of swinging around the city, you're dashing around, you're flipping, you're doing all these stunts in the air, and you are trying to move from point A to point B, not only as efficiently as possible, but maybe a little bit stylish as possible as well. It's just so really incredible to feel like Spider-Man. Like, I'm not kidding. It feels so good to play this game. It's just, I could swing around for hours, and I have, where it's just like, I don't do anything else besides just swinging around. So if that's the thing, that's the selling point, because for me, it was like, does this game feel good? And it feels so good. The best feeling Spider-Man game there's ever been. I can't talk about that enough. But anyway, so swinging around, getting from point A to point B is really, really fun. But what else is there? Because there's so much more to this game. Now, for anyone who's been following this, you can kind of see the relation it draws, so to speak, to the Arkham games. And by that, I mean the Arkham Asylum, City, Origin, Knight franchise, that crazy Batman stuff, where it's, you're kind of fighting guys, but you're also kind of stalking guys at different points and things like that, kind of running around a city trying to save it. I gotta say, I feel that even though it does borrow from that heavily, I think Spider-Man really fits that better. Combat-wise, this game is very, very similar to that, except one specific thing: your Spidey sense. So in Batman, whenever you get that kind of little flash around his head, you'd hit like the B button if you're on Xbox, or circle if you're on PlayStation, and you would counter, typically. I think that was what it was, or Y. And then you would be able to kind of go on from there. In this, it's like a dodge. You just dodge out of the way. You don't necessarily counter until you get some abilities later on. And these guys pack a punch. You guys, seriously, it is devastatingly difficult at first. And this is on the normal difficulty. The first guy I was fighting, the first kind of boss, I was getting just destroyed by. I was not prepared, because Spidey, for some odd reason in this game, seems to be more of a glass cannon. If he takes like one or two hits from some of these bigger dudes, like these brutes, you will like lose half of your health or 3/4 of your health really quickly. Like, it'll just be gone. And that's, trying to kind of, I think, fulfill that fantasy of being Spider-Man, is that you're not going to really take hits, because if you're, thinking like Spidey and moving around like Spidey and using all of his really cool gadgets, which are wonderful and excellent, and kind of using your timing just right, you will never get hit by anybody. And that is kind of the fun of it. But it's also kind of a little jarring at first, so there is a little bit of a skill ceiling here, so keep that in mind when you're hopping in. If you're like, man, this is kind of tough, even on the easy difficulty, I think it's still pretty, a little more difficult than normal. But you look at Insomniac's kind of repertoire of games, it's interesting. You see Sunset Overdrive, you see Ratchet and Clank. This is something that kind of shares some, similarities between those titles, especially Sunset Overdrive, but this is a little bit newer for them, so I'm not sure if they have to tweak kind of the combat difficulty or whatnot. But there's a new Game Plus mode coming down the line, so we'll see what they do with that. But yeah, the combat is fantastic. You're flying around, you're just like knocking guys down. If there's a shield guy, instead of jumping over him, you dash, you slide underneath of him and hit him from behind. And you have all these fun gadgets like a web bomb that kind of, you shoot on a guy and it explodes and webs everybody up. Or you kind of have these, my favorites, like the sling trap, where you can either put it on a wall, it'll hit a guy, pull him into it, so you can do that stealthily, or just do it mid-combat, and that takes that guy out. Or you can shoot it on somebody, and it can either pull them to the wall, do the same thing, or it can hit another person and pull two guys together, and then just get all webbed up. And that is my favorite, because you're like, oh, cool, 2 birds, 1 stone. That's one of the things I like the most. So, there's like shock webs, there's all this stuff, and after a fight is done, you feel like Spider-Man would feel, because you're standing victorious, but you look around and all of these bad guys are all webbed up. Like, these guys will lay on the ground or like fall down, and they're getting up, and you just shoot them a bunch of your web shooters, and they're just stuck to the ground. You're like, yep, you're done. Which is really, really enjoyable. It's just like, oh, cool, you can do that. And that's just kind of a way to disarm them permanently. So the combat's fun. The stealth stuff I really enjoy because I love running around as Spidey, fighting people, doing all this stuff, being out and about. But there's something really fun about taking Spider-Man and taking these really cool abilities and saying, what if he applies them to a kind of quiet approach? He has like hostages, and if somebody sees him, somebody's gonna die. So he's kind of sneaking around, doing these little perch takedowns. Again, very Arkham Predator mode, style, which is totally fine, but it feels so good, and you feel so powerful. Like, you really do. Like, you just are moving around. You can be so quick about this. You can kind of see when guys are safe to take down, or if it says, like, dangerous or danger, it's kind of like, oh, somebody else is looking at them. If you take them down, they'll be alerted. So you can really get the sense and this feel of being like this intelligent hunter, where you're taking out all these guys and they don't even know what to do, and they just kind of find other dudes all webbed up, and by that time it's too late. So yeah, I love that a lot. There's a lot of things in this game to kind of keep you going to, as far as like collectibles. It's a little bit of a collectathon. There's a lot of stuff, but the best things I would have to say are getting these backpacks that Peter kind of stashed around when he was younger. Every time you get one of these backpacks, you can open it up and look at a little piece of Spider-Man history, because this Spider-Man, you're playing as I think like 23-year-old or mid-20s Peter Parker, so he's been doing this for like 8 years. It's not something he's just getting into, so there's a history here. So you're not meeting all these villains that you see for the first time. There's a lot of them that you're kind of just like, oh yeah, I've fought him plenty of times before. So there's this kind of this sense of even nostalgia within this game, especially even if you like the Raimi trilogy. There's a few little nods here and there that just make me think of it, which just puts a smile on my face. But there's plenty of things to collect and to do. There's a bunch of like little sciencey side quests. There's collecting pigeons, doing all of these things, which helps you unlock other suits and other gadgets and other abilities. So if you unlock a suit, sometimes it comes with an ability. You can actually take that ability off and put it on any suit. So if you like one suit but you don't like the ability, or vice versa, you can kind of play around with that. And on the fly, where you don't have to go to any particular place. You don't have to stop what you're doing. You can just pause midair, change out your suit, which is great. And that suit will also be used in the loading screens, so you can just kind of take a second to look at these things, because there are some loading screens in this game, and that's it kind of is unfortunate, but it's fine, because you look at this world, and especially New York itself doesn't really have any loading screens. But once you get into an actual mission, and you get to the place where you need to kind of, stop what you're doing and go into a door or something like that, go into a room, it'll have a loading screen. But you get to look at the design of these things, and they're not too long of load times, and it's just a pleasure to kind of see the detail put into this stuff. I really absolutely love it. Negatives. Let's talk about that. And the only big negative I would say right now, weirdly, is Mr. Negative. He's kind of the main bad guy of this game. Probably a lot of people have seen him in the kind of marketing for the game. Pretty boring, pretty straightforward villain. It's kind of nice once in a while to get a shot of some of these other Spider-Man villains, because Spider-Man, a lot like Batman, has an incredibly cool rogues gallery. Just so many cool, fun characters that I absolutely adore. And this guy I'm not really familiar with at all, and he didn't really stand out to me. Visually, I think he's kind of interesting, but he's just kind of shooting energy blasts, and it's kind of unfortunate. But I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that Insomniac knows how great of a game they made, I think, to some degree, and there is hope for the future. So you don't want to burn your very best, villain on that first game. So you look at, even movies do this too, where they kind of don't want to pick out the best ones. It's like when they keep rebooting Spider-Man, they don't necessarily go right away with Green Goblin or Venom. It's kind of like one of those things they try to build up to. So hopefully in the future we get some more of these villains. But there are some other villains in this game, which I was happy to see. I promise I won't spoil them here, but it's really nice to see that, and kind of, teasing the future. And one thing I would say about this game, unlike God of War, which my biggest complaint with that game is it felt like a big tease for what was next, this game has that kind of plant for the future. Like, it's it's cultivating it, but when I was done with it, like the main story, I didn't feel like I was shortchanged. There was still plenty of stuff going on and plenty of villains to deal with, which I really appreciated. They're kind of a little bit later in the game, but once you get to them, you just like, oh, it feels really good. It's really nice. The other thing that's really wonderful, though, I'm talking about the negatives here, but that's kind of the only negative I can think of. But the thing I love about this game, too, is the interconnective tissue that you feel with a larger world. There is Avengers Tower. There is Doctor Strange's Sanctum Sanctorum. There's a Wakandan embassy. And it feels like, you take pictures of these things, and Peters kind of says something, here or there, like, oh, I wish the Avengers were around. They're probably on the West Coast or whatever. But those little things make it feel like there's a hope for the future. Like there's a hope for that there's a bigger world out here, and it's not just Peter alone in New York, and that's just isolated from everything. That there is more, out there, more heroes that are doing stuff. There's a bunch of kind of nods to even the Netflix series stuff out there. So I'm really hoping that we do get an interconnected superhero universe of video games, because to me that's more exciting than even the MCU, because there's so much potential. And Insomniac kind of had their pick of the litter when it came to choosing who they got to make a game about, and Spider-Man rose to the top, and that's so cool. But there's always the chance that there could be others out there. I just want them to start working on 2 right away. It's super fun. Maybe the last thing I want to mention about all of this is that there are some kind of other stealth quote-unquote missions where you play as Mary Jane and maybe some other people, and it's pretty forgiving, and it's a nice way to kind of change up the gameplay a little bit. It's really interesting to play a game where you play as Spider-Man and they kind of take that away from you for a minute, and you forget how much, while you're playing as Spider-Man, how sad you'd be if they took that away from you. But the moment they do, you're like, oh man, I want to play Spider-Man again. And those missions are great. They sometimes can feel like they drag on just a smidge long, but the environments that you're exploring are really, really cool. And getting to see the detail, see the focus, and see all the love and attention they put into these spots is a lot of fun. And kind of trying to figure out these mysteries, like why all these villains are coming out of the woodwork and what's happening in this world, can be really, really fun. And seeing Spider-Man through the eyes of someone else is really fun too, because as you play as Mary Jane, once in a while you'll see Peter, he'll help you out in some of these missions, and you're like, oh goodness, that's what Spider-Man looks like when he's doing his thing and I'm not playing as Spider-Man. That's really fun. But overall, this game is incredible. It's amazing. I love it. It's spectacular, to use all the Spider-Man words. But I love it. I can't stop playing it. It was one of those games that I haven't played in a while where I just get so enveloped that I'm always trying to make more time for it, where it's just, I really want to be in this world, and just, even if it's 45 minutes, and I'll push that to an hour, hour and a half, I'll be like, all right, I've got a thing to do in an hour. I'm going to play it for just a little bit, and then it's just oh my gosh, just a little bit more. So yeah, it's addicting, and even though the combat can be kind of hard, and I don't think the main villain is super compelling, this is definitely one of the reasons to have a PlayStation 4. It's so good, and I wish that everybody could play this game, but unfortunately, it doesn't seem like that's going to be the case right now. But if you have a PlayStation 4 and you are interested in this at all, I would say it's totally worth your money. I'm working on a review right now for it, but it's going to get a high score from me. I'm still trying to find things that are kind of flawed with it to, give it a full kind of critical and more objective, thought. But it's so hard. And like I said, I am a self-proclaimed Spider-Man fan, but that also means that I am extra critical on stuff like this, but they really nailed it. And I gotta say, the combat and the movement, specifically the web swinging, is the best it's ever been. So definitely check it out if you haven't already. But if you have, leave a comment. Let me know. I want to hear what you guys think about it, because this isn't just me, spouting all my ideas. I want this to be a dialogue. So let me know, or you can tweet at me. I am at JimmyGood013 over on Twitter. Let me know what you're thinking of the game. If you're loving it, if you don't like it, where do you stand? I want to know. If you want to support the channel, consider liking this video. You can subscribe to us if you like this sort of thing, or if you like just reviews in general. Full review of this to come shortly, so thank you for your patience. But if you want to support us further, consider checking us over on patreon.com/criticalreviews, where you can get our podcast a day early if you're at $5 and up. But even at the $1 tier, you can get your beautiful face drawn into our card game, which we are working on diligently. So yeah, definitely check that out, or just share us with a friend. Share us on Facebook. Do all that stuff. Please. Thank you. We love it. We appreciate you. And until next time, just remember to adapt and overcome.
Checking out a noise. Nighty night.